Hey guys, tonight we're heading into a time when summer forgot to show up, and the world turned cold in ways that made even the bravest souls shiver. You're going to wake up in a year where snow falls in June, crops die before they sprout, and the sun? Well, it's just a pale rumor behind a sky thick with volcanic ash. You probably won't survive this, but hey, let's pretend you do. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to snow. Not the cozy kind that whispers hot cocoa and wool socks, but a grim gray dusting that crunches underfoot like ash. It's June. The birds are silent. The trees wear frost like a funeral veil. You step outside and squint at the sky, but the sun's gone missing. Just a dull smear behind a ceiling of haze. You rub your arms, expecting the chill to pass. It doesn't. Your breath fogs in the air, and the village feels like it's holding its breath too. People glance up, muttering about omens and punishments. You hear someone joke that gods turned off the thermostat. You don't laugh. Historians still argue whether the ash cloud from Mount Tambora's eruption was thick enough to block sunlight entirely, or if other atmospheric shifts played a role. But you don't care about the science. You care that your potato patch looks like it's been hit by winter's ghost. You care that your neighbor's cow won't stop shivering. The ash came from Indonesia, they say, though you won't learn that for years. Mount Tambora blew its top in April 1815, flinging millions of tons of debris into the stratosphere. The particles scattered across the globe, dimming the sun and twisting the weather into something unrecognizable. You're living in the aftermath, and it's not poetic. It's just cold. You wrap your shawl tighter and head to the village square. There's talk of snow in Virginia, frost in Paris, and rice shortages in Bengal. Someone swears they saw icicles on a mango tree. You nod, not because you believe them, but because reality's already bent so far out of shape that mango icicles feel plausible. The local priest says it's a test. The baker says it's the end. The blacksmith just shrugs and keeps hammering. His forge the only warm place left in town. You linger near it, pretending you have something to fix. Your fingers crack and bleed from the cold. You start sleeping in your clothes, then under them. You dream of sunlit fields and wake to frost on your blanket. The chickens stop laying. The bees vanish. You find a dead sparrow on your windowsill and bury it with a whisper. One fringe theory you hear in passing from the traveling tinker is that the sun's been cursed by a comet. He says it with a wink, but you notice he's wearing 3 coats and selling candles like they're gold. You buy 2.
The village council meets in the tavern, which now smells more like damp wool than ale. They talk about rationing, about sending someone to the next town for news. You volunteer, not because you're brave, but because you need to move. Sitting still feels like surrender. You walk for hours through slush and silence. The trees look skeletal, like they're bracing for something worse. You pass a farmhouse with smoke curling from the chimney and wonder if they have soup. You don't knock. When you return, the tavern's darker. The windows are stuffed with cloth to keep out the chill. Someone's playing a fiddle, slow and sad. You sit near the hearth and listen, letting the music thaw your thoughts. You start marking days by how many layers you wear. 3 means it's bearable. 5 means don't go outside. You learn to read the sky like a mood ring. Gray means frost. Yellow means false hope. And blue? You haven't seen blue in months. One morning, you find a patch of grass. It's brown and brittle, but it's not frozen. You kneel beside it like it's sacred. A child joins you, pokes it with a stick, and asks if it's edible. You say no, but you're not sure. You begin to understand that survival isn't about strength. It's about small choices, about sharing your last candle, about walking slower to conserve warmth, about pretending the snow is beautiful so your sister doesn't cry. And through it all, the ash hangs above you, silent and smug. You curse it sometimes, whispering into the wind like it might carry your anger back to Tambora. But mostly, you just endure. Because that's what people do when the world freezes over. They endure.
The crops die first. You wake one morning to the sound of your neighbor sobbing in his field. You don't need to ask why. His barley, once green and promising, is now a brittle carpet of frost-bitten stalks. You walk past your own garden and feel the same ache. The peas never sprouted. The potatoes turned black underground. The cabbages look like they've been punched by winter itself. You kneel and dig with your fingers, hoping for one good root, just one. But the soil is hard, cold, and unforgiving. You find a worm, sluggish and pale. You pocket it, protein. The village holds a meeting. Everyone's talking over each other about crop failures, about seed grain, about what to do next. The mayor, who used to be a cheerful man with a belly like a bread oven, now looks like he's aged 10 years in 10 weeks. He stands up and says, "We burned the seed." You blink. Burn it? He explains that the barns are too damp, the grain is molding, and the rats are winning. If they don't burn the seed to keep warm, they'll freeze before they starve. It's a cruel math. You watch your neighbor toss a sack of rye into the fire. He doesn't cry this time. Historians still argue whether the crop failures were more due to the cold or the lack of sunlight. Some say the ash cloud dimmed the photosynthesis process so severely that even hardy plants gave up. Others blame the erratic frosts, the sudden hailstorms, the snow in August. You don't care. You just know your pantry is empty. You start experimenting. You boil dandelions. You mash acorns.
You try to ferment nettles into something vaguely edible. Your sister makes a stew from moss and old bread crusts. It tastes like regret. One fringe remedy makes the rounds, a sun tonic made from crushed eggshells, vinegar, and honey. It's supposed to restore warmth to the body. You try it. It mostly restores nausea. The animals begin to look at you differently. Your goat eyes you with suspicion. Your chickens, those feathered freeloaders, stop laying and start pecking. You consider eating one, but they're too scrawny. You settle for their eggs when they bother. You hear rumors from the next village. A man there tried to plant in July. July! The frost came anyway. He buried his tools and walked into the woods. No one's seen him since. You start to notice how quiet everything is. No buzzing insects, no rustling leaves, just the crunch of your boots and the occasional cough. Even the dogs seem subdued, curling into themselves like they're trying to disappear.
One day, you find a single tomato in your greenhouse. It's small, misshapen, and slightly green. You cradle it like a newborn. Your sister suggests slicing it thin and sharing it. You suggest worshipping it. You settle on both. The village starts trading recipes for famine cakes, a mix of flour, water, and whatever else won't kill you. Some add sawdust. Some add crushed bones. You try one made with boiled leather. It's chewy. You pretend it's meat. You begin to dream of food. Not feasts, just apples, bread, butter. You wake up chewing your blanket. The mayor organizes a communal garden. Everyone contributes scraps, seeds, compost. You plant hope and water it with desperation. Nothing grows. You learn that hunger isn't just a stomach thing. It's in your bones, your thoughts, your sleep. You forget words. You forget birthdays. You forget what it felt like to be full. One day, a traveling merchant arrives. He's thin as a rake and smells like desperation. He offers dried beans for silver. You offer your boots. He accepts. You boil the beans for hours. They never soften. You eat them anyway. The merchant tells you stories of snow in Naples, of frozen rice paddies in China, of people eating clay in Switzerland. You nod. Misery loves company. You start keeping a food journal, not to track calories, just to remember. Monday, bark tea. Tuesday, boiled weeds. Wednesday, nothing. You find yourself staring at your bookshelf, not for knowledge, for calories. You wonder how many pages you'd need to eat to feel full. You tear one out, just in case. Your sister starts talking to the fireplace. You don't interrupt. You understand. And still, the crops die. Over and over. You plant. You hope. You fail. But you keep planting. Because even in a year without summer, hope is the last thing to freeze.
Soup from stones. That's what the old woman down the lane calls it. You visit her because she claims to have a recipe that fills the belly and tricks the soul. You're skeptical, but you're also hungry enough to believe in culinary witchcraft. Her cottage smells like boiled roots and damp wool. She hands you a bowl. It's warm. That's enough. Inside, water, a few onion skins, a pinch of salt, and yes, a smooth gray stone. She swears it's from the river and that it remembers fish. You sip. It tastes like memory and desperation. You go home and try your own version. You boil bark. You scrape lichen off the fence. You add a button for texture. Your sister says it's the best thing she's eaten all week. You both laugh, and it feels like cheating death. Historians still argue whether famine recipes from 1816 were truly widespread or just isolated acts of desperation. Some claim entire communities developed stone soup rituals to maintain morale. Others say it was mostly oral tradition, shared stories to soften the hunger. Either way, you're living it. You start collecting odd ingredients: crushed eggshells, burnt toast crumbs, dried beet tops. You trade a spool of thread for a handful of dried peas. You soak them for 2 days. They still crunch. One fringe idea floats through the village: boiling leather boots. You try it. The broth smells like regret and foot sweat. You drink it anyway. Your stomach gurgles in protest, but you feel warmer. You learn to make survival tea from pine needles. It's bitter, but it doesn't kill you. You add a splash of vinegar and pretend it's medicinal. Your sister calls it forest wine. You toast with chipped mugs and hollow laughter. The tavern starts hosting potluck nights. Everyone brings whatever they have. One night the stew includes turnip peelings, dried apple cores, and something that might be squirrel. No one asks. You eat in silence, grateful for the warmth. You discover that hunger sharpens the senses. You can smell a carrot from across the room. You can hear a loaf of bread being sliced 3 houses away. You dream in flavors: cinnamon, butter, roasted garlic. You wake up chewing your pillow. One day, a child finds a mushroom in the woods. The village gathers to debate its edibility. The priest says it's a sign. The baker says it's poison. The child eats it. Turns out it's fine. Everyone cheers like it's Christmas.
You start a recipe book, not for cooking, just for remembering. If summer returns, you write, I'll make potato stew with thyme and real salt. You underline real. You try roasting acorns. They taste like dirt and disappointment. You grind them into flour and bake a flatbread. It's dense, bitter, and oddly satisfying. You name it ash cake. Your sister invents a dessert: boiled apple peel with honey and a sprinkle of crushed mint. You eat it slowly, savoring each bite like it's stolen treasure. You cry afterward,
not because it's sad, because it's beautiful. You hear rumors of people eating cats in the city. You hug yours tighter. The mayor announces a recipe contest. It's a joke, but it lifts spirits. You enter your bark stew. You lose to a woman who made snow pudding, just melted snow with molasses and a dash of hope. She wins a candle. You learn that cooking is no longer about flavor. It's about survival, ritual, and pretending. You stir pots like they're spells. You garnish with twigs. You serve with ceremony. One night, you host a dinner. Just you and your sister. You light a candle. You set the table. You serve pine tea and ash cake. You toast to the sun, wherever it is. And for a moment, the world feels warm.
The market vanishes. You used to love market days, the bustle, the smells, the gossip. You'd haggle for apples, flirt over fish, and sneak pastries when no one was looking. But now, the stalls are empty. The vendors are gone. The square echoes with footsteps and frost. You walk through it anyway, out of habit. A few desperate souls linger, clutching bundles of wilted herbs or jars of mystery pickles. You see a man trying to sell a single onion. He's asking for a blanket. You consider it. Your blanket is thin. The onion is real. You trade a quilt for it. Historians still argue whether local economies collapsed entirely during the year without a summer or simply shifted into survival mode. Some say barter replaced currency almost overnight. Others claim coins still held value, just not for food. You don't care. You just know your silver spoon won't buy soup anymore. You start carrying items in your pockets, buttons, thread, bits of cloth. Currency now depends on usefulness. A needle is worth more than a coin. A candle stub is practically gold. You trade a pair of socks for a handful of dried beans. You trade a story for a cup of pine tea. One fringe tale circulates. A man in Vienna traded his wedding ring for a loaf of bread. You don't know if it's true, but you understand it. The tavern becomes the new market. People gather there not to drink, but to barter. You overhear deals like 2 eggs for a day's labor, or half a rabbit for firewood. You offer to mend a coat in exchange for a carrot. The carrot is shriveled. You eat it like it's cake. You learn to appraise things differently. A cracked pot is still a pot. A frayed scarf is still warm. You stop caring about aesthetics. Function is king. You meet a woman who knits socks from dog hair. You trade her a comb for a pair. They itch, but they're warm. You wear them with pride. The mayor tries to regulate trade. He sets up a fair exchange board in the square. It lists suggested values. 1 candle equals 2 eggs. 1 blanket equals 5 potatoes. No one follows it. It's more art than science. You hear of traveling traders who carry spices. Spices. You dream of cinnamon. You'd trade your boots for a pinch.
You never meet them. You start making things to trade. You carve spoons. You braid rope. You write lullabies and offer them for food. One man gives you a turnip for a song. You sing it twice. Your sister starts baking hope cakes, just flour and water shaped like stars. She trades them for stories. People come to your door with tales of snow in Sicily, of frozen vineyards in France, of rice riots in China. You listen. You feed them stars. One day, a stranger arrives with a sack of salt, real salt. He asks for wool. You give him your scarf. He gives you a handful. You lick it like candy. You learn that trade is no longer about profit. It's about survival, connection, and trust. You trade favors. You trade warmth. You trade silence. You start a ledger, not for money, for memory. Traded comb for socks. Traded lullaby for turnip. Traded scarf for salt. You read it like a diary. You hear of a village where trade is banned. Everyone hoards. Everyone starves. You're glad you live here. One night, you trade a candle for a story. The man tells you about a summer he remembers. Blue skies, green fields, strawberries. You cry. He does too. And for a moment, the market returns, not with goods, but with grace.
Cold in the bones. It's July, and you wake up shivering. Not the kind of shiver that begs for a blanket, but the deep, marrow-level chill that makes your teeth ache and your joints feel like rusted hinges. You sit up slowly, your breath fogging the air like you're camping in January. Your sister is curled beside you, wrapped in every piece of fabric you own. She's wearing 2 hats. You don't question it. The cold isn't just outside anymore. It's inside you. It's in your knees, your knuckles, your spine. You move like an old man, even though you're barely 20. You try to stretch, but your muscles protest. You've become a walking icicle. Historians still argue whether the persistent cold of 1816 was purely volcanic in origin or compounded by a solar minimum, a period when the sun itself seemed to dim. Some say it was a perfect storm of ash, atmospheric shifts, and cosmic bad luck. You say it's just cruel. You start sleeping in piles. Not metaphorically. Literally, your family stacks together like puppies, limbs tangled, breath shared. It's not comfortable, but it's warm. You learn to sleep with someone's foot in your face and a cat on your chest. You don't complain. One fringe theory you hear from the traveling tinkerer: the cold is punishment for human arrogance. He says we flew too close to the sun with our machines and our pride. You ask what machines? He shrugs and sells you a wool sock. You begin to measure time by how cold you are. Morning is 3 blankets cold. Afternoon is 2 scarves and a hat. Night is don't move or you'll die. You stop opening windows. You stuff rags into every crack. You hang quilts over doors. Your house becomes a cocoon. You try to make heat. You burn furniture. You burn books. You burn the wooden spoon your grandmother carved. You apologize to it first. The blacksmith becomes the village hero. His forge glows like a sun. People gather near it pretending they have metal to fix. He lets them stay. He starts charging in potatoes. You invent games to stay warm. Blanket burrito is a favorite. Wrap yourself tight and roll across the floor. Hot potato becomes literal. You heat one and pass it around. No one eats it. It's too valuable. You hear of people freezing in their sleep. You start sleeping in shifts, checking each other's breath. You learn to listen for silence, the dangerous kind. Your sister knits constantly. Scarves, mittens, hats. She uses yarn, string, even old shoelaces. You wear a hat made from curtain fringe. It's hideous. You love it. You try to exercise indoors, jumping jacks, squats, dancing. You invent a routine called fire dance, just flailing near the hearth. It works. You sweat, you laugh, you fall over. One day, you find a patch of sunlight on the floor. It's weak, pale, barely there. You sit in it like it's a throne. You stay until it fades. You feel like royalty. You start collecting warmth, not just physical, emotional. A smile, a joke, a memory of summer. You hoard them like firewood. You remember swimming. You remember sunburns. You remember sweating. You cry. The mayor organizes a warmth festival. It's absurd. It's beautiful. Everyone wears their brightest clothes. Someone paints a fake sun. You dance. You forget the cold for an hour. You learn that warmth isn't just heat. It's connection, movement, hope. You hug more. You sing louder. You tell stories that make people laugh. One night, your sister tells a joke so bad you snort tea through your nose. You both collapse in giggles. You feel warm. And for a moment, the cold leaves your bones.
The church stays open. Even when the tavern shutters, even when the schoolhouse turns into a soup shelter, the church doors remain ajar. You walk there one morning, not for faith exactly, but for warmth. The pews are cold, the candles few, but the silence is soft. You sit near the front, where the sun used to stream through stained glass. Now it's just gray light, filtered through frost. The priest stands at the pulpit, wrapped in 3 robes and a scarf that looks suspiciously like a curtain. He speaks slowly, like he's trying not to fog the air too much. "We are being tested," he says, "but we are not abandoned." You glance around. No one looks convinced. Historians still argue whether religious attendance surged or declined during the year without a summer. Some records show packed churches, desperate prayers, and sermons about divine punishment. Others suggest people turned inward, losing faith in institutions that couldn't feed them. You sit in the middle, half believer, half skeptic, fully cold. The priest starts offering warmth blessings. He lays hands on people's shoulders and whispers prayers for heat. You go up once. His fingers are shaking. You feel no warmth, but you thank him anyway. One fringe belief spreads through the village that the sun is angry. Not God, just the sun itself, a living thing, offended by human greed. A child draws a picture of it with a frown and icicles. You hang it on your wall. The church begins hosting soup nights, thin broth, stale bread, and hymns. You sing because it helps you forget the taste. Your sister harmonizes. Her voice cracks. You pretend not to notice. You start attending more often, not for salvation, but for community.
The church becomes a place to share stories, trade news, cry quietly. You sit beside people you barely know and feel less alone. One Sunday, the priest reads from Psalms, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." You whisper the rest with him. It feels appropriate. You help repair the roof, not because you care about leaks, because it's something to do. You hammer nails with numb fingers. You joke that you're building a chapel for frost. No one laughs, but they smile. The church starts collecting donations, not money, but warmth. Blankets, candles, soup ingredients. You give a pair of mittens. They're patched and ugly. The priest thanks you like they're gold. You hear of a nearby village where the church closed. The priest fled. The people turned on each other. You pray that yours stays open. One night, the priest hosts a sun vigil. Everyone gathers with lanterns and sings to the sky. You chant, you hum, you cry. The clouds don't part, but your heart does. You begin to see the church not as a building, but as a hearth, a place where people gather, share, survive. You stop caring about doctrine. You care about warmth. You start writing prayers, not to God, but to summer. Dear July, please come back. I miss sweating. You tuck them into the hymn book. Your sister paints a mural on the church wall. It's crude, bright, and full of sunflowers. The priest blesses it. You think it's the most beautiful thing in the village. One day the priest collapses mid-sermon. Exhaustion, hunger, cold. You help carry him to the back room. He smiles weakly and says, "Even the shepherd needs shelter." You nod. You take over the next service. You read a poem about warmth. You sing a lullaby. You light a candle. People cry. You do too. And for a moment, the church feels like summer.
The dead stay longer. You wake to the sound of bells, not the cheerful kind. These toll slow and low, like the sky itself is mourning. Another death. You don't ask who, you just wrap your scarf tighter and step outside, where the frost clings to everything like grief. The graveyard is frozen, literally. The ground is too hard to dig. The gravedigger, once a quiet man with strong arms and a steady shovel, now spends his days staring at the earth, waiting for it to soften. It doesn't. Bodies pile up, not in heaps. This isn't a horror story, but in quiet corners, wrapped in cloth, stored in sheds, laid gently in barns. You help carry one, a woman who used to sell honey. Her hands are still sticky. You don't ask why. Historians still argue whether the death toll of 1816 was directly caused by the cold or by the famine that followed. Some say disease spread faster in the damp, crowded shelters. Others blame malnutrition, despair, and the collapse of medical care. You just know people are dying, and the ground won't let them go. One fringe belief emerges, that the earth is angry and refuses to accept the dead. A child whispers it to you while clutching a doll made of straw. You nod. You've heard stranger things. The priest starts holding memorials without burials,
candles, prayers, names spoken aloud. You attend one for a man you barely knew. You cry anyway. You help build a waiting house, a small shed near the church where the dead can rest until the thaw. It smells of lavender and sorrow. You sweep it daily. You hum lullabies to the silence.
Your sister writes poems for the departed. She tucks them into the folds of their blankets. You read one, "Sleep now, where the sun will find you later." You cry again. You hear of a village where they stack the dead in the bell tower. You pray yours never has to. One day the gravedigger tries anyway. He swings his pickaxe at the frozen soil. It clangs like metal on stone. He curses. You offer him tea. He drinks it like it's holy. You start marking deaths in your journal. Not names, just symbols. A star for someone young, a leaf for someone old, a flame for someone who made you laugh. The pages fill too fast. You learn that mourning changes in the cold. There are fewer flowers, fewer songs, fewer embraces. Grief becomes quiet, practical, slow. You miss the loud kind. You visit the graveyard anyway. You stand among the stones and whisper stories. You tell the bees, even though they're gone. You leave offerings, buttons, feathers, bits of bread. One morning, the ground softens. Just a little, enough for one grave. The village gathers. You dig together, hands blistered, hearts heavy. You bury the honey seller with her sticky hands and a jar of her last batch. You sing. The priest says, "She'll be warm now." You believe him. You start carving wooden markers. Simple, sturdy, beautiful. You paint them with bright colors. You place them near the waiting house. It looks like a garden of memory. Your sister suggests planting flowers when the thaw comes. You nod. You promise to plant sunflowers. And for a moment, the dead feel closer, not in fear, but in love.
Strangers at the door. It starts with a knock, not the polite kind, not the rhythmic tap of a neighbor borrowing salt, but a slow, uncertain thud. You open the door to a man wrapped in a blanket, his eyes hollow, his boots missing. Behind him, a woman clutches a child. They don't speak. They just look at you like you might be summer in disguise. You let them in. They're from the next village over, or maybe the one beyond that. It's hard to tell. Names blur when roads vanish under snow and maps become memories. They say their crops failed, their animals died, their mayor fled. You nod. You've heard it before. Historians still argue whether migration during the year without a summer was widespread or localized. Some say entire communities uprooted, searching for warmth and food. Others claim most people stayed put, too weak or too stubborn to move. You just know your house is fuller now. The strangers sleep on the floor. You give them soup, thin, bitter, but warm. The child smiles. You feel like royalty. One fringe rumor spreads. Snow fell in Bengal, real snow, on rice paddies. You hear it from a merchant passing through, his cart empty, but his story's rich. He says people rioted over rice, that the monsoon betrayed them. You believe him. More strangers arrive. A family with frost-bitten fingers, a boy with a limp, a woman who used to be a teacher, but now trades songs for bread. You make space. You share blankets. You learn names.
Your sister starts a welcome wall, a patch of cloth where newcomers stitch their initials. It grows fast. You run out of thread. You hear stories of snow in Sicily, of frozen vineyards in France, of people eating clay in Switzerland. You listen, you cry, you laugh, you learn. One man tells you about Tambora, a volcano far away that exploded with the force of 1,000 cannons. He says it darkened the sky, poisoned the air, changed the weather. You blink. You've never heard of it. You ask where it is. He shrugs. Somewhere east. You start calling the strangers sun chasers. They came looking for warmth. They found you. You organize a meal. Everyone contributes. Roots, crumbs, stories. You eat together, shoulder to shoulder, like a patchwork family. Someone sings. Someone dances. Someone snores mid-soup. You learn new recipes. Rice porridge from China, flatbread from Turkey, a stew made from dried fish and hope. You write them down. You learn new words. Chale means let's go in Bengali. Frio means cold in Spanish. Tambora means curse in your dreams. You start teaching the children games, blanket forts, shadow puppets. Guess the vegetable. Spoiler alert, it's always turnip. They laugh. You feel warm. One night, a woman tells you about her village's last summer. She describes mangoes, festivals, swimming in rivers. You close your eyes and see it. You thank her. You begin to understand that survival isn't solitary. It's shared. It's messy. It's loud. You stop worrying about space. You worry about silence. You hang a sign on your door. Warmth inside. People knock. You answer. And for a moment, the strangers feel like home.
The volcano nobody saw. You're sitting by the hearth, carving a spoon from driftwood, when the merchant returns. He's got frost in his beard and a story in his pocket. Tambora, he says, like it's a spell. That's the name, the mountain that broke the sky. You blink. Tambora sounds like a dance or a dessert. He laughs. It's a volcano. Blew up last year in the Indies. Big enough to blot out the sun. You stare at him. You've never seen a volcano. You've never seen the Indies. But you've seen the sky turn gray, the crops die, the summer vanish. You believe him. Historians still argue whether news of Tambora reached Europe and North America quickly or trickled in years later. Some say ships carried the story within months. Others claim the connection between eruption and climate wasn't made until decades later. You just know your world changed, and now you have a name for the thief. Tambora. The merchant describes it. A mountain taller than anything you've imagined, exploding with fire and ash, shaking the earth, sending clouds into the heavens. He says the blast was heard 1,000 miles away. He says the sky weeps because of it. You picture it. A giant, angry mountain throwing a tantrum. You imagine the ash rising, swirling, drifting across oceans, slipping into your lungs, your soil, your soup. You cough. One fringe theory he shares: Tambora cracked the planet's mood. Not just the weather, but the balance. He says it woke something ancient. You nod. You felt it too. You start telling people, Tambora did this. They blink. They ask if it's a god. You say no. Just a mountain. Just a reminder that the earth is bigger than us. You carve the name into your spoon. You hang it on the wall. Your sister paints a picture of Tambora. It's wild, red, chaotic. She adds birds flying away, clouds curling like smoke, a sun hiding behind a curtain. You hang it beside the spoon. You begin to see patterns, the cold, the hunger, the silence, all threads from Tambora's eruption. You feel connected to something vast, terrifying, and oddly comforting. You're not alone. The whole world is shivering with you. You hear of snow in July in New York, frost in August in Germany, crop failures in China. Tambora's fingerprints are everywhere. You start writing a song. Tambora stole the summer, left us soup and sorrow. It's terrible. You sing it anyway. You wonder what it looked like before it blew. Peaceful? Majestic? You wonder if anyone saw it coming. You wonder if they had time to run. You dream of it, a mountain roaring, the sky darkening, the world holding its breath. You wake up sweating. You smile. You haven't felt warm in weeks. You tell the children about Tambora. You make it a bedtime story. Once upon a time, a mountain got angry. They listen, wide-eyed. They ask if it'll happen again. You say maybe. You say we'll be ready. You start collecting stories of other volcanoes, Krakatoa, Vesuvius, Etna. You write them in your journal. You call it the Book of Fire. You begin to understand that survival isn't just about food and warmth, it's about knowing, naming the monster, telling the tale, making sense of the ash. And for a moment, Tambora feels less like a curse and more like a chapter. Inventing warmth. You're out of firewood. Again. The pile you stacked so proudly last week vanished in 2 nights of desperate burning. You stare at the empty corner and sigh. Your sister suggests burning the chair. You suggest burning your regrets. You settle on the chair. You start getting creative. You stitch straw into coats. You stuff your boots with moss. You hang pots from the ceiling to trap rising heat. It's not elegant, but it's survival. You become a warmth engineer. Historians still argue whether the innovations of 1816 were born from necessity or ingenuity. Some say people simply repurposed what they had. Others claim the crisis sparked a wave of invention, early insulation techniques, communal heating strategies, even rudimentary solar traps. You just know your house now looks like a scarecrow married a chimney. One fringe idea you hear from the tinker: paint your walls black to absorb heat. You try it. It works. A little. Your sister adds stars. Now it's a galaxy of warmth. You build a heat trap in the corner. Stones warmed by the fire, wrapped in cloth, placed under blankets. You call it the dragon's nest. You sleep there like royalty. You learn to layer. Not just clothes, everything. Blankets, rugs, curtains, newspapers. You wear 3 shirts, 2 scarves, and a curtain fringe hat. You look ridiculous. You feel cozy. You invent a game. Warm or weird. You point at an object and decide if it's a heat source or a fashion crime. The moss boots win both categories. You start collecting metal. Not for trade, for heat. Pots, pans, spoons. You place them near the fire, let them absorb warmth, then tuck them into your bed. You call them sleeping soldiers. You hear of a village that built a communal oven. Everyone sleeps around it like cats. You consider suggesting it to the mayor. You decide to build one yourself. You dig a pit. You line it with stones. You light a fire and cover it with earth. You sleep on top. It's warm. It's weird. It works. Your sister starts making heat dolls. Fabric bundles filled with warm stones. She gives them names. You cuddle Sir Toasty every night. You learn that movement creates warmth. You dance. You jump. You invent a routine called the volcano shuffle. It involves stomping, spinning, and yelling, "Tambora!" at random intervals. It's ridiculous. It's effective. You start hosting warmth parties. Everyone brings something hot, a bowl of soup, a candle, a story. You sit close, share body heat, laugh. You call it the melt. You discover that laughter is a furnace. You tell jokes, bad ones. Why did the snowman move to Sicily? He wanted to melt into retirement. Your sister groans. You feel warmer. You try cooking in bed. You place a pot near your feet, light a candle under it, and hope for soup. You get lukewarm disappointment. You eat it anyway. You hear of people using animal fat as insulation. You try it. Your boots smell like regret. You wear them proudly. You start writing a guide, 101 Ways to Not Freeze. It includes tips like hug a goat and pretend you're in the tropics. You illustrate it with stick figures in bikinis. You begin to understand that warmth isn't just heat. It's creativity, humor, connection. You stop chasing fire. You start inventing it. And for a moment, the cold feels like a challenge, not a curse.
The famine games. It begins with the whisper. There's stew at the tavern. You don't ask what's in it. You just go. The room is dim, crowded, and smells like boiled hope. You sit beside strangers, clutching a chipped bowl, waiting for your turn. When it comes, you get a ladle of something brown, thin, and steaming. You sip. It tastes like secrets. The stew circle becomes a ritual. Everyone contributes something. Roots, crumbs, dried herbs, even stories. You bring a carrot. It's small, shriveled, and shaped like a question mark. You feel proud. Historians still argue whether communal cooking during the year without a summer was organized or spontaneous. Some say villages formed official stew committees. Others claim it was just neighbors pooling scraps. You don't care. You just know it's the only hot meal you'll get this week. One fringe tradition emerges, the famine games. Not a competition, more like a barter bazaar wrapped in theater. People dress up, perform skits, and trade ingredients. You wear a blanket toga and recite a poem about turnips. You get a spoonful of honey in return. You learn that food is no longer about flavor. It's about survival, performance, and generosity. You stop asking, "What is it?" and start asking, "Who made it?" You invent a stew recipe, ash broth with mystery root and a dash of optimism. It's terrible. People love it. Your sister starts a secret ingredient challenge. Each week, someone sneaks something odd into the pot. Dandelion petals, pine needles, crushed mint. You guess. You laugh. You eat. You hear of a village where stew circles became sacred. People sang before serving. They called it the Bowl of Blessing. You adopt the name. You whisper it before each meal. You start trading stories for food. A tale about summer earns you a biscuit. A joke about Tambora gets you a spoonful of jam. You become a storyteller with a hungry audience. One night, someone brings meat. Real meat. They say it's rabbit. You don't ask. You chew slowly, reverently. You cry. You learn to stretch ingredients. One potato becomes 3 meals. One onion becomes a week's worth of flavor. You become a culinary magician. You host a stew night. You decorate with pine cones and optimism. You serve hope soup. It's mostly water. People say it's delicious. You start a stew journal. Monday, bark and beet. Tuesday, moss and mint. Wednesday, mystery meat. You add drawings. You call it the Book of Broth. You hear of people eating rats. You don't judge. You hug your cat tighter. You begin to understand that famine isn't just hunger. It's creativity, community, and resilience. You stop fearing the empty pantry. You start celebrating the full pot. You invent a stew song. Boil it down, stir it slow, add a laugh, let it glow.
You sing it every night. And for a moment, the famine feels like a feast.
The animals go first. You wake to silence, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that makes your stomach twist. The goat isn't bleating. The chickens aren't scratching. Even the cat seems subdued, curled in a tight ball like it's trying to disappear. You step outside and find the goat lying still, her breath shallow, her eyes distant. You kneel beside her, whisper her name, offer her a crust of bread. She doesn't move. She dies that night. You bury her behind the shed, in the softest patch of earth you can find. Your sister places a flower on the mound, dried, brittle, but beautiful. You both cry, not just for the goat, but for what she represented: milk, warmth, companionship, a piece of normal life. Historians still argue whether livestock deaths in 1816 were due more to starvation or exposure. Some say the animals simply couldn't survive the cold. Others blame the lack of fodder, the failed harvests, the desperation. You just know your barn is quieter now. One fringe rumor reaches you. In Vienna, people are eating horses, not just the old ones, the prized ones, the ones that pulled carriages and won races. You shudder. You used to dream of riding a horse across green fields. Now you dream of stew. You start rationing feed. The chickens get scraps. The cat gets broth. You eat less so they can eat more. It's a losing game.
One morning, you find a chicken frozen in place, mid-step. You bury her beside the goat. You stop naming the others. You hear of a village where they turned their barn into a shelter for people. The animals were gone. The hay was gone. The warmth remained. You consider doing the same. Your sister starts drawing the animals, not as they are, but as they were, plump, lively, full of mischief. She hangs the sketches on the wall. You call it the Gallery of Ghosts. You begin to understand that animals weren't just food. They were family, routine, comfort. Their absence echoes. You try to trap a rabbit. You fail. You try again. You catch a squirrel. You let it go. You hear of people eating dogs. You don't believe it. You don't want to. You start feeding birds, not because you have extra, because you need to believe something still flies. One day, a stranger arrives with a donkey. It's thin, tired, and wearing a scarf. You offer him soup. He offers you a ride. You decline. You pet the donkey. It brays softly. You begin to dream of animals, herds of goats, flocks of chickens, cats curled in sunbeams. You wake up reaching for them. You write a poem. Feathers fall, hooves fade. Warmth once walked, now stayed. In silence we remember fur and hope the birds return. You hang it beside the sketches. You start carving animals from wood. Tiny goats, chickens, cats.
You place them on the mantle. You talk to them. You learn that grief isn't just for people. You mourn feathers, fur, and familiar sounds. And for a moment, the barn feels full again.
Hope in the ashes. It begins with a puddle, just a small one, barely more than a damp patch in the dirt. But it's not frozen. You stare at it like it's a miracle. Your sister pokes it with a stick and giggles. You both laugh, loud and long, like you've forgotten how. The thaw is slow, reluctant, but it's there. The icicles drip, the snow recedes, the air smells different, less like frost, more like possibility. You step outside without your third scarf. You shiver, but you smile. Historians still argue whether the climate began to normalize in late 1816 or if the effects lingered into the following year. Some say the seasons returned in fits and starts. Others claim the damage lasted for years. You just know the puddle didn't freeze overnight. One fringe belief spreads. The birds are scouts of summer. If they return, warmth follows. You start watching the sky. You find a sprout, tiny, green, defiant. It pushes through the soil like it's daring the world to freeze again. You kneel beside it. You whisper encouragement. You cry. Your sister starts planting again. Not with hope, with stubbornness. She digs, sows, waters. She talks to the seeds. You join her. You name the sprouts. You hear of a village where flowers bloomed early. People danced around them like it was midsummer. You consider doing the same. You host a thaw party. Everyone brings something green. Leaves, herbs, even mold. You decorate with moss. You serve spring soup. It's mostly optimism. You start writing again. Not just journals, poems, songs, letters to the sun. You hang them on the wall. You call it the Garden of Words. You hear birdsong, real birdsong. You run outside and see a sparrow. You scream. You scare it away. You apologize. You cry again. You begin to understand that hope isn't loud. It's quiet, persistent, sneaky. It grows in puddles and sprouts and giggles. You start baking again. Just flat bread, but with herbs. You call it green bread. You share it with the neighbors. They say it tastes like spring. You find your old summer clothes. You try them on. They don't fit. You laugh. You keep them anyway. You start planning, not just for tomorrow, for next season. You sketch garden layouts. You list seeds. You dream. You write a new poem. From ash we rise, from frost we bloom. The sun returns, dispelling gloom. In every sprout a whispered cheer. The world remembers warmth is near. You hang it beside the puddle. You begin to believe, not just in survival, in revival, in color, in laughter, in birds. And for a moment, the ashes feel fertile.
The birds return. You wake to a sound you haven't heard in months. High, clear, and impossibly alive. Birds. Real birds, not imagined chirps or wind tricks, but actual feathered creatures singing like the sky owes them a favor. You rush outside, barefoot, breath fogging, heart racing. There they are, sparrows, finches, maybe even a robin. They flit between branches, peck at thawed soil, and chirp like they've never known silence. You stand there stunned, as if someone turned the world back on. Historians still argue whether bird migrations in 1816 were delayed, rerouted, or simply failed. Some say the cold confused them. Others claim they adapted, found new paths, waited for signs. You just know they're here now, and it feels like a miracle. One fringe tale you hear? Birds are messengers from the sun. When they sing, it means the sun is listening again. You believe it. You hum back. Your sister starts feeding them. Crumbs, seeds, bits of dried fruit. She builds a tiny feeder from a broken ladle and hangs it near the window. You watch them eat. You feel rich. You begin to notice other signs. Buds on trees, grass pushing through snow, a breeze that doesn't bite. You walk outside without gloves. You survive. You host a bird party. Everyone brings something bright. Ribbons, drawings, songs. You decorate the square with feathers. You sing. You dance. You forget the cold. You start naming the birds. Hope, Toast, Tambora's apology. You keep a journal of sightings. You sketch them. You write poems. You become a bird bard.
You hear of a village where birds nested early. People built shrines, offered breadcrumbs, held festivals. You consider doing the same. You find a nest, tiny, perfect, tucked into the eaves. You check it daily. One morning, there are eggs. You cry. You begin to understand that birds aren't just animals. They're symbols of movement, of return, of resilience. You stop fearing the sky. You start watching it. Your sister paints a mural. Birds flying over a thawed landscape, sun rising behind them, flowers blooming below. You hang it beside the volcano painting. You call it balance. You start planting flowers, not for food, but for beauty. Daisies, sunflowers, wild herbs. You talk to them. You sing to them. You believe in them. You write a new song. Feathers flutter, frost retreats, sunlight dances on our streets. In every chirp, a promise made, that warmth returns, that fear will fade. You teach it to the children. They sing it loud. The birds join in. You begin to dream of summer, not as a memory, but as a future. You see picnics, swimming, sweating. You wake smiling. You hear of people traveling again, roads clearing, markets reopening. You consider visiting the next village. You pack breadcrumbs. And for a moment, the sky feels generous.
Memory and firelight. You sit by the hearth, the fire crackling softly, casting golden shadows on the walls.
Your sister is asleep beside you, curled under a quilt stitched from scraps of every season. Outside, the world is thawing, slowly, tenderly. The frost is retreating, the soil is waking, and the birds, those brave little prophets, are still singing. You sip pine tea, not because you have to, but because it's tradition now. You've grown fond of its bitterness, its resilience. You stir it with the spoon you carved during the worst of it, the one with tambora etched into the handle. You smile. Historians still argue whether the trauma of 1816 left lasting cultural scars. Some say it faded quickly, buried under new harvests and warmer skies. Others claim it lingered, in stories, in recipes, in the way people watched the weather with wary eyes. You know it lives in you, in your bones, your habits, your fire rituals. One fringe belief you hear from the tinker, now a regular visitor: the year changed time itself, that the seasons hiccuped, that the calendar bent. You don't argue. You just mark your days by warmth now. You begin telling the story. To children, to neighbors, to anyone who listen. You describe the snow in June, the soup from stones, the strangers who became family. You speak of the goat, the puddle, the birds. You speak of laughter, of dancing, of surviving. Your sister writes it down. She calls it the year the world froze over. You suggest the year we didn't. You compromise, the year we melted.
You host a gathering, not a feast, just a circle around the fire. You pass the spoon. Each person shares a memory. Some cry, some laugh, some just sit quietly. You feel whole. You carve a new spoon. This one says hope. You hang it beside the first. You plant sunflowers. They bloom. You cry. You begin to understand that survival isn't just about enduring. It's about remembering, about honoring the cold, the hunger, the warmth you invented. You stop fearing winter. You start respecting it. You write a final poem. From frost we rose, from ash we grew, with laughter stitched in every shoe. The sun returned, the birds took flight, and we remember by firelight. You hang it above the hearth, and for a moment, memory feels like. So now, as the fire dims and the birds settle into their nests, you sit back and let the quiet wrap around you like a well-worn quilt. The world outside is still healing, still remembering, still thawing. But inside, in this little corner of warmth and story, everything feels gentle again. You trace the edge of your carved spoon, the one that carried soup and secrets. You listen to the soft breathing of your sister, the crackle of the fire, the distant chirp of a night bird. You think about puddles that didn't freeze, about laughter that bubbled up from empty bellies, about strangers who knocked and stayed. The year the world froze over didn't take
everything. It didn't take your voice, your hands, your stubborn hope. It didn't take the stories. And now, those stories glow brighter than any sun. You close your eyes and imagine summer. Not just the heat, but the color, the movement, the music. You imagine fields full of sunflowers, rivers that sparkle, children chasing birds. You imagine a world that remembers how to bloom. And as you drift into sleep, you carry with you the warmth you invented, the laughter you shared, and the quiet promise that even the coldest years end. Sleep well, sun chaser.